As the campaign draws to a close, millions of Canadians are preparing to head to the polls tomorrow. And throughout this campaign, we've been answering all the election questions you've sent to our Ask CBC News team. And tonight, we want to answer your voting day questions. So joining us now is Elections Canada spokesperson Diane Benson to answer all of those last-minute questions that need to be answered. So Diane, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Pleasure to be here.
So I want to start with a couple viewer questions, and we have one here from Colleen, who says that my understanding is that the deadline for registration for vote by mail was September 14th, which it was. And she says my adult daughter got sick with COVID symptoms after that deadline passed. She got tested for COVID today, but won't have results for up to 72 hours. She's required to isolate if asymptomatic or positive for COVID. How is she supposed to vote?
Elections Canada has worked closely with public health officials all along the way as we've prepared for this election and during the election. And we want people to follow local public health guidelines. And if they are saying you need to self-isolate, then unfortunately you would not be able to come to the polls and vote tomorrow. We want to protect the health and safety of electors who are coming to the polls and of the election workers too. So we would ask people who are having symptoms or who may be testing positive not to come to the polls.
Okay, well, that's certainly an important one, especially during this very sort of unprecedented election that we're having right now in the middle of a pandemic. So we have another question here from Jennifer, and she says, my question is, what if I do vote by mail? She did want to, but the mail-in ballot never arrived. So she says, I requested it well before the deadline, and with the knowledge that Elections Canada received far fewer requests for mail ballots than expected, I tracked my request and my kit was sent out, but it didn't arrive. And the election is tomorrow. So does this mean that she can't vote?
She's not totally without options. We recognize that people wanted to use more vote by mail, but they're reliant on a mail service, and depending where they are in the country, that can vary on those times. So it's great that she had the kit and she has her tracking number. So you applied online, you get a tracking number. And what we would advise you to do is go to the polls tomorrow with the tracking number and say to the poll official, look, here's what happened. I applied to vote by mail. I did not get the kit in time. I have the tracking number. And what the poll official will do when you explain that is they will create what is called a status certificate, and you'll fill it out and you'll sign it. And what you're basically signing is, I haven't voted another way. I did not vote by mail, but I did apply to vote by mail. You'll sign that and you'll be allowed to vote in the regular manner. And what that means is when we go to count the ballots, we know that this person applied, there was a tracking number, and there's a matching status certificate that says, I did not vote by mail, I voted the regular way. So that is an option for people who might find themselves in that circumstance tomorrow.
And we also have a question here from Karen, who's a voter in Spadina, Fort York. And she says, from recent news, I learned that the Liberal Party has cut ties with Kevin Vuong. Does this mean that there won't be any more Liberal candidates in my ward? I believe that Vuong's name is still on the ballot. If I choose him, will this vote go to the Liberals or not? And of course, we wanted to ask this because, Diane, of course, there's been a couple parties now that have had candidates that are no longer running for them. I know you can't speak to any one specific party or one specific candidate, but what does happen if a candidate drops out or is dropped by the party?
These things happen in every election where a candidate applies to, brings in their nomination papers to the returning officer by the deadline, and they are reviewed and everything's in order. They have a letter from the party endorsing them, and their name, they get approved and their name is on the ballot. But once that happens, once that approval has happened and they are the official candidate, their name is on the ballot because we have to send those ballots out to be printed. So this does happen every election, and it happens to all parties that a candidate might not be available. Health issues can also happen where a candidate is unable to fulfill the mandate. So it's on the ballot. If at the end of this, when we tally up all the numbers, that candidate who may have withdrawn actually has enough votes to be the declared candidate, then the process would be that they would inform the Speaker of the House of Commons that they were not going to stand as an MP. And then the Speaker would notify Elections Canada that a seat is vacant. And then in due time, when a by-election would be set, the Speaker informs Elections Canada and we conduct a by-election.
Okay. And we also have one here from William, who says, due to my disappointment in how democracy functions in Canada, I have been intentionally spoiling my ballot since the 1990s. He does note that he's always gone to vote. He says, I'm always interested in how many other voters feel the same way, but I never see any results on spoiled ballots. So the question is, are spoiled ballots, are they counted? And if not, why not?
Well, I think there's a difference in terminology here, because what we call a spoiled ballot is when a ballot has something wrong with it. It's got a tear in it, or sometimes the printer ink gets smudged. And so if the elector or the poll official saw that a ballot had one of these marks, they would determine that is a spoiled ballot. It gets put in a special envelope and gets counted at the end of the night. So we have the total number of ballots that we started with are accounted for at the end. But he would give the elector a replacement ballot, and the elector would go and vote and put it back in. So that's what we call a spoiled ballot. I think what your listener is asking about is rejected ballots. And they're the ones that end up in the box and get shown at the count to the witnesses. And they are rejected for a number of reasons. So they could be rejected because somebody put an X in all of the circles for all of the candidates. They could be rejected because somebody made marks around on the ballot and stuff. So those are rejected, but they are counted and they do show up in the official voting results. The thing is, they don't count for any one particular candidate, and you can't call it a protest vote because you don't really know, out of all those rejected ballots, which one was marked on purpose to spoil it, as your listener is saying, or if it was just that somebody made a mess of the ballot, and decided they were going to do something like that. So it's the numbers are there, all of the ballots are accounted for, but it might not show the way your listener or viewer is hoping that it would.
Okay, and we have a question here from Charlene. This is quite a specific one, dealing with a family emergency. So not sure what you can speak to here, Diane. But Charlene says we have to make an emergency trip from Alberta to BC today. Her mom is dying of cancer, so very sorry to hear that. And as of 3 days ago, she has chosen assisted death on Monday. Can we vote in Peachland on Monday, even though we live in Airdrie? We both have our voter cards, and we'll bring them with us just in case.
The life circumstances happen to people every election. And as we get to this point, there are options in all the lead up. But right now, the one option that we have is to vote on election day at the polling place associated with your address. And things happen to people often in the day or two before, not often, but occasionally in the day or two before the vote. It could be a family crisis. It could be a health issue for you. People can get into accidents and end up in the hospital, those sorts of things. And unfortunately, at that time, the option on election day is that you need to be voting in person at a poll associated with your address. So I think, unfortunately, I know in some provinces there are rules where you can vote anywhere in the province, but that's not the way it goes federally.
Okay, well, those are some of the viewer questions that we've received, Diane. So we are out of time, but any final thoughts just for people tomorrow who are maybe a little nervous about going to that polling station in person, sort of final thoughts that you might have to people ahead of Election Day?
Well, just what I started out saying, we have worked closely with public health officials at the federal, provincial, and municipal level, and worked very carefully to have COVID protocols in place at the polls. And all the health officials have said voting is a safe activity. We've had 5 provincial and territorial elections during the time that the pandemic is on. And right now, the rate of vaccination is quite high, and poll workers will all be wearing masks. There'll be sanitation stations for you, and one-way traffic and physical distancing and all those sorts of things. So in fact, it's going to be a very safe activity, and we want Canadians to feel confident that when they go to vote, they'll be voting in a safe and healthy way.
Okay. Elections Canada spokesperson Diane Benson joining us from Ottawa this evening. Diane, thank you.